What he says here is, it says a lot of things. Now at the end of the century, 300 years after Giordano Bruno, it is invigorating and fortifying for a cultured person to assess the efforts of the nation. He's being sarcastic here. Finland, North Schleswig, it's the Germans taking Sønderjylland, Alsace, Saarlouis, Armenia, Transvaal. Imagine if only the individual was compelled to be ashamed on behalf of mankind. This is not on behalf of Christianity or Christian brothers, etc. This is on behalf of mankind. What is going on in the world, including in Armenia, the Armenian massacres. That is wrong. Cynicism, reality, all that. But it's not about to become a severe necessity for the sake of mankind's happiness that if for no other reason, each person starts to feel ashamed of the actions of mankind as a crowd. So this is what we have around 1900. This kind of intellectual concern. Sigbjørn Osfelder, if you haven't read it, it's great. And the quote comes from a Danish publication actually, but from 1903. So, what we have, one of my favorite pictures. We have this concern for the Armenians, the persecuted Armenians, for the survivors, for the very many orphans. What do we do about it? Well, we collect money, we write op-eds in newspapers and whatever intellectuals do, but there are also people who want to do more, right? Again, this explains why we have witnesses to the genocide. Because they create organizations. In Scandinavia, we have women missionary workers, KMA. In Sweden, Norway and Denmark. First Sweden, then Denmark, then Norway, and we also have committees in Finland. It is not such a, it's part of Russia, of course, it's a principality of Russia, but we have a lot of Swedish-Finnish women, forming committees and help sponsoring the Armenian orphans in Danish and Swedish care. So this is at Lake Guljuk, and as all of you who know about the Armenian genocides, and especially the Habut Mamoudzou province, will know that Lake Guljuk in 1915 will become a major massacre site. We'll get to that. But here we have some Danes, some Armenians, some Americans here, and the Armenian chef is there. At Lake Guljuk, which is where missionaries, relief workers, etc. would go in this when it got too hot down in the cities in the summertime. But who are the witnesses? Well, we have out in the provinces, we have a number. Most of them are Danes, then some are Norwegians, and a couple of Swedes. We have in the Mamoudzou province, if you imagine Tanner's map for a moment here, it's about there, right? We have 4 Danes there. All of them will publish, all write letters, which you find in the archives, giving detailed information, very, very detailed information, trustworthy information about every stage of the way to genocide, from the early radicalization. The title of my upcoming book is It is Like Sitting on a Volcano. That is how they felt in the years leading up to the genocide. That is the metaphor most used. Because, so you were talking about how does genocide happen? And then you have the very structural explanations, etc. There is why do you decide to kill the Armenians? Why do you decide to do that? Well, there are all these telegrams, all these stages, but there's also the general mood. There's also the, how can you make people kill their neighbors when push comes to shove, right? When it actually comes down to the nitty-gritty of slaughtering a whole people. That is because there are some tensions. There is a background here. There are earlier massacres. There is a lurking dehumanization of the other. Without that, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's difficult to commit a genocide. You need people who want to do this. And of course you can, There's very many ways to lure them to do it. There's religion, there's economy, etc. But what documents are great from diplomats and politicians, etc. But in order to complete the picture, you need this kind of documentation from the missionaries and relief workers out in the country, because they tell you why people are killing people. Without that, no genocide. So, who are the witnesses? Well, we have, as I said, 4 Danes in the Minorities province. We have Maria Jacobsen. Some of you will know her, published her diaries in Armenian with the original Danish text in the back, and then a British translation at the at the Comidas Institute. That is the most well-known. We also have Karen Marie Petersen, who worked at the Danish orphanage Emmaus. Her recollections, equally important, no one knows them. They are, what we have is bits and pieces here in Danish, which I am hopefully going to translate at some point. They are equally important. What she did was, she was running the Danish orphanage Emmaus in Mestre, Elatik town, and she was sheltering Armenian refugees there, including one man, because it was near impossible to hide men, Armenian men there, could get you killed. So they did it with one person, a priest, and he was hidden, you know, through in the woodshed, you know, that kind of thing. But he also, what they all do is they're not, I don't know how you imagine a missionary woman to be, but if you have, I often, you know, meet people who think they're prejudiced, they are not very skilled, etc., etc. None of that is true. All of them are extremely skilled. All of them are not very prejudiced. You can't really work down there for very many years if you don't have an open mind, if you don't know the languages, if you don't work with the local governor, local mayor, etc. They all have contacts there. So they actually meet these people, they talk to them, they discuss, why do you do this? Why do you exterminate the Armenians? And that is what they all say, yes, they are being exterminated. There is absolutely no doubt about that. That is what they're doing. So, I don't know how much time I have, but I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. We have the 4 Danes there. 2 more. Hansine Marsha, working directly for the Germans, but also Danish missionary worker. She witnesses, for instance, very many things about, I talked about Lake Gülchuk. She traveled through there in 1916, sees everything, all the dead bodies down there. Thousands upon thousands of skeletons of murdered Armenians. That's what she sees. And we also have Jenny Jensen, who witnesses, she works at a German orphanage, how 200 of her, the girls in her care are being taken away and burned to death. And she goes out, she doesn't believe it at first, then she goes out and sees them. Again, this is genocide we're talking about. It's not just wartime contingency or whatever. I mean, why don't we take 200 girls from an orphanage and burn them to death? Because you don't want Armenians. So, that is, and then we have, of course, further to the east, we have a Bodil Bjørn, you know her, a Norwegian missionary. She's with Alma Johansson, Swedish. And what they see, I mean, talk about burning, that's a big deal of how you get rid of the Armenians in the Mush region. That is herding them into stables, churches, etc., and burning them down. That's how you do it there. And they, Bodil Bjørn, Alma Johansson, when they're being kicked out from there, they go to the Danes. They live in a tent in the garden at the Emmaus orphanage because there's no room inside, because that is full of refugees from the genocide. Alma Johansson, Bodil Bjørn stays because she wants to find out whether any of the Armenians in her care are still alive. Alma Johansson goes home, she goes through Denmark and Little Jarlsberg. She travels around the Erzurum region. Also extremely important witness to the genocide. 5 minutes. Thank you, Anta. And so, that is a bit of what we have. That's a bit of what we have in the archives, we have in the libraries, we have published recollections of the genocide. I can go on and on about that. Nobody knows about them. This is just a pamphlet here, a book there. They're very rare. Maybe there's just one copy of them in the National Library of Denmark, Sweden and Norway. Extremely important stuff. One of them, I'll just take one example, 1920, a certain Marie Dinesen publishes a book about pretty much the genocide in Harput province. That is based on Maria Jacobsen's recollections. There is her diaries, but there's also, she actually also tells her story of the genocide, with a lot of details that you don't have in the diaries. But she's remaining anonymous. Why? Because she wants to go back to Harput and continue working. That soon turns out to be impossible, not to say dangerous. But that is why they're keeping there. A lot of these recollections are anonymous at this particular point. But you can tell that it is Maria Jacobsen. No one else could know about these things that she's telling about. Again, extremely important. There's one copy I know of in Danish. Again, stuff that needs to be translated, stuff that needs to be put into the stream of all the documentation we have of the genocide. 5 minutes, right, and then we have newspapers. It was front page news in Denmark, Sweden and Norway. We have op-eds about the genocide. We have poems about the genocide, as it happens. Yes? Yes, that's what we're doing, yeah. No time for that. That's the Emmaus, some of the kids at the Emmaus staging a play around 1910, before genocide. 5 years later, they're pretty much all dead. So, again, what do we know? This is a well-known photo. What we probably don't know, most of you, is that of the deportation through, from Harput through Mestre, Main Street in Mestre. And let's see. The first time that was published was in a Danish book from 1920. That is the first known publication, probably taken by the American consul Leslie Davis. And again, also what we have from Scandinavian documentation. This is a painting by one of the Danish missionaries there, Colonel A. Petersen, of Mestre, and we have Harput up in the mountains. And this is, again, extremely important if you want to get a grip of what does this look like. I mean, genocide can become very abstract, but this is very concrete. I mean, here we have the Fabricatoria brothers. Here, what we know of them is that they were pretty much slaughtered, and their fine houses were taken over by the local Turkish leadership. Well, that's right there, right? It's very, very, not abstract anymore, it's very concrete, very hands-on. This is where it happened. This is how it looks. Guljuk Revisited. This is a photo that probably you don't know. This is of the massacres at Lake Guljuk, 1915 massacres. This will appear in this is from, probably taken by Leslie Davis, an American consul. This will appear in a book chapter later this year. 1 minute. All right, so, yes, so why is this important? Yeah, why are we part of Armenian and world history again? Yeah, well, convergent documentation, right? That's one thing, very important history. We have some documentation of a particular massacre site. We get more and more and more. Makes denial harder, right? Yeah, and how about giving name to the atrocities? Well, why do we use the term genocide, folkemord, in various Scandinavian languages? Because it is the most precise term. It is not because some diplomats, politicians, whatever, likes it or not from any given country. It doesn't matter. history, social science is about precision. And every reliable witness we have, including the Scandinavian ones, including the diplomats, the Danish, Swedish, there was also Norwegian, in Constantinople. What are they talking about? They're talking about organized extermination. They're talking about under cover of war. That is what the Danish diplomat Vendel and the Swedish diplomat Ankersvärd are talking about. They're not talking about war and then extermination. They're talking about under cover of war. Again, reforms. They can always go back to the reform issue. That is what the young church wants to solve. They want to solve the reform issue, the Armenian question, through mass murder. That is it. So what do? I mean, during the genocide, they call it Hjalmar Branting and Arne Garborg. And one of you know Arne Garborg is Norwegian. He's probably the first one to use in Norway the term folkemordet, nynorsk, 1917 in his diaries, concerning the extermination of the Armenians. 1925 we have Omar Benediksen in Denmark using the term folkemord. Why? Because it is the most precise term. And that, yeah, well, that I could go on and on, but I don't have time. So thank you for that.